All right, so we're really diving deep today into this whole world of celebrity culture. You've given us a ton of stuff to go through,
Yeah.
articles and podcasts, and it really seems like you want to go beyond just the surface level.
Right.
And we've got this episode of the Chappie Ox podcast, and they're asking a pretty big question.
Mm-hmm.
Is being a celebrity really living the dream?
It's a good question, and it's a question that's been around, I think, for as long as we've had celebrities, but I think it's even more relevant today.
Right.
We're constantly seeing images of this luxury and influence,
Yeah,
and it's so easy to get caught up in the idea that fame equals happiness.
totally. And Chappie Ox really dives into this whole idea of aspiration. Like they bring up Jay-Z as an example.
Mm-hmm.
He's obviously incredibly successful financially, but it's more than that, right?
Right.
He's become this like cultural icon.
It's interesting how celebrity culture has shifted in that way. I think
Yeah.
we're not just talking about wealth anymore. It's about impact. It's about shaping trends and conversations. And someone like Jay-Z, he's a symbol of success, but in a much broader sense than just money.
Totally. And then you add in social media, which Chappie X points out creates this illusion of accessibility.
Right.
Like we're getting this kind of curated glimpse into their lives, but is that really bringing us closer, or is it just making that fantasy even more alluring?
That's a good point. These platforms give celebrities the power to control the narrative, to present this very carefully crafted image to the world. And it's really easy to forget that we're only seeing this very small fraction of the whole story.
Exactly. And that's where things start to get really interesting because Chappie X doesn't just stop at the glamour.
Right.
They go behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And suddenly you see the lack of privacy, the constant scrutiny, the pressure to always be on. And it really makes you wonder if it's even possible to have a normal life under that kind of microscope.
Imagine the stress of having every single move you make analyzed, every word you say dissected by millions of people.
Yeah.
It's not just about having your photo taken by the paparazzi. It's about that constant pressure to maintain a certain image to meet these really high expectations that are often completely unrealistic and unsustainable.
Absolutely. And Chappie X also touches on how this impacts relationships, like personal relationships.
Yeah.
They talk about how hard it is for celebrities to find genuine connections, to know who's really in their corner. And that whole idea really struck a chord with me. Like, even for us, regular folks, navigating relationships can be tricky.
Oh, yeah.
But imagine trying to do that when everybody wants something from you and your personal life is constantly in the headlines.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder how much of yourself you have to sacrifice for that level of fame.
And that's something that Chappie X really emphasizes, the sacrifices inherent in celebrity culture.
Yeah.
It's not just about giving up your privacy. It's about the emotional toll,
Right.
the potential for isolation, the pressure to constantly perform even when you're struggling.
And it all comes back to that question, is it worth it? We see the glamorous photo shoots, the red carpet appearances, the sold-out concerts.
Right.
But what's really happening behind the scenes?
Yeah.
And that's what this whole deep dive is all about, right?
Yeah.
Peeling back the layers and getting to the heart
Yeah.
of what celebrity culture is really all about.
Exactly. And I think Chappie X does a great job of highlighting that complexity because it's not this simple black and white issue. There are positives and negatives to fame, and I think it's important to consider both sides of that equation.
Absolutely. And in the next part of our deep dive, we're going to get into some of those more nuanced aspects of celebrity culture. We'll look at how fame has evolved in the digital age, how social media has really changed the game, and what all of this means for us.
Yeah.
The people who are fascinated by and influenced by this world. So stay tuned because it's about to get really interesting.
Picking up where we left off, it's interesting how the definition of fame itself is constantly evolving.
Yeah.
The Chappie X podcast touched on this.
Right.
And I think it's a really key part of what you're exploring in your research.
You're totally right. It used to be that fame was like this exclusive club,
Yeah.
right? Movie stars, musicians, a handful of like really well-known authors.
Yeah.
But now, with the rise of social media and reality TV, the landscape has totally shifted.
And that's created this really interesting dynamic, right? On the one hand, you have this democratization of fame where anyone with a smartphone and an internet connection can potentially build a following and gain influence.
Yeah.
It's empowering in a way to have that kind of reach and that kind of access.
But then there's the flip side.
Right.
Chappie X talks about the kind of the dark side of this accessibility.
Right.
The pressure to constantly create content,
Yeah.
to maintain that online persona, to deal with the negativity and the trolls.
Yeah.
It can be a really toxic environment.
Absolutely. And it's not just about the emotional toll. There are real world consequences to think about as well.
Right.
We know from the research on more traditional celebrities
Mm.
that fame can have a big impact on privacy, relationships, mental health.
Right.
Now with social media, those issues are just amplified even further.
It's like fame used to be this distant thing, something you aspired to.
Yeah.
But now, in a way, it's almost inescapable.
Right.
We're constantly bombarded with these images of like seemingly perfect lives,
Yeah.
successful people.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to get caught up in that comparison game.
And that's where I think critical thinking becomes so crucial.
Yeah.
It's really important to remember that what we see online is often this curated, highly edited version of reality.
Totally.
It's not the whole picture.
Right.
As ChatBX puts it, we're comparing our behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel.
That's such a good quote.
Yeah.
And it's so true. It's so easy to forget that we're only seeing this tiny sliver of someone's life.
Right.
The parts that they choose to share.
Yeah.
And it's so tempting to then judge our own lives against that impossible standard.
Yeah. It's a recipe for dissatisfaction. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges we face in this new world of fame, where it seems like everyone is vying for attention, for validation, for that like coveted influencer status.
Right.
How do we navigate that without losing ourselves in the process?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right.
I mean, Chapiox talks about how some celebrities are choosing to step back from the spotlight,
Yeah.
prioritizing their privacy over fame.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes you wonder if maybe that's a sign of a shift in values,
Right.
a recognition that there's more to life than chasing likes and followers.
It's an interesting trend, and I think it speaks to a growing awareness of the potential pitfalls of fame.
Yeah.
It suggests that maybe we're starting to reevaluate our priorities,
Yeah.
to question this equation of fame with success.
Okay, so we've talked about the allure of fame, the reality check sacrifices involved. We've even delved into how fame is transformed in this digital age.
Right. But there's one more crucial aspect I think we need to unpack.
And it's something that seems to be coming up a lot in your research.
Yeah.
The impact of all this on our own lives,
Yeah.
whether we're seeking fame or just trying to make sense of it all.
That's a really great point, because ultimately this isn't just about celebrities.
Right.
It's about how celebrity culture shapes our perceptions,
Yeah.
our aspirations,
Mhm.
our very understanding of success and happiness.
Exactly. And that's what makes this topic so thought-provoking. Because if we're not careful,
Yeah.
this constant exposure to curated perfection,
Right.
to these unattainable lifestyles,
Mhm.
it can lead to feelings of inadequacy,
Yeah.
envy, even despair.
Absolutely.
How do we grapple with that?
I think it starts with media literacy,
Okay.
with becoming critical consumers of all this information we're constantly being bombarded with.
Right.
We need to recognize that what we see online is often this carefully constructed illusion
Yeah.
designed to generate clicks and likes and ultimately profit.
It's like we're all living in this giant social experiment, and we're not even sure what the hypothesis is.
Right.
But it's clear that celebrity culture has this profound impact on how we view ourselves, our relationships, even our goals.
Yeah.
And that's what we'll continue to unpack in the final part of this deep dive. So we've been talking about how celebrity culture can sometimes feel like this giant social experiment,
Yeah.
and how it can really affect how we see ourselves and the world around us. But I'm kind of curious, can this influence actually be a good thing?
Yeah, it's interesting you asked that, because the ChatBX podcast actually brought up this idea of positive influence.
Yep.
Like seeing people from all walks of life achieving these incredible things.
Right.
It can be really inspiring. It can give us hope, motivate us to go after our own dreams, and maybe even create a sense of community with other people who have similar goals.
That makes a lot of sense. And I know I've definitely been inspired by some celebrities who use their platform to speak up for causes they believe in, or who just seem to really live their lives with passion and purpose, you know?
Right, exactly. But the challenge, like ChatBX pointed out, is finding that balance. Because the other side of that inspiration can be the pressure to live up to these sometimes impossible standards.
Yeah.
We start comparing ourselves, feeling like we're not good enough, not successful enough, not glamorous enough.
Right.
It's almost like we're chasing after this perfect version of ourselves that doesn't even exist.
And that's where things can get really tricky, right?
Yeah.
Because if we're not careful, that comparison can take away our joy. Yeah. Make us feel like we're not enough.
Absolutely.
Even lead to us being really negative about ourselves.
ChatBX really emphasized the importance of figuring out what success means for us personally,
Yeah.
finding happiness outside of fame and fortune.
Yeah.
It's about realizing that everyone's journey is different
Yeah.
and that real happiness comes from inside, not from other people telling you you're great.
It's like that saying, comparison is the thief of joy. We get so focused on comparing ourselves to other people, especially with social media everywhere these days, that we forget to appreciate our own talents and what we've achieved.
It's a good point. It's a really powerful reminder to practice gratitude, to focus on the good stuff in our lives, and to celebrate our own journeys.
Totally. So
Right.
after looking at all these different aspects of celebrity culture, the big question is, where do we go from here?
Yeah.
How do we handle this world without getting lost in all the hype and the pressure and the constant flood of information?
That's the question, isn't it? And I think ChatBX offers some helpful advice. It all starts with awareness, recognizing how much celebrity culture influences our thoughts, feelings, and actions.
Perfect.
Understanding the role that the media and advertising play in shaping what we think and what we want.
So once we realize all that, we can start making more deliberate choices, right?
Right.
Like choosing to look at media that matches our values and inspires us,
Exactly.
but choosing to follow people who seem genuine and use their influence for good.
That's it. And most importantly, choosing to focus on growing as individuals and what we can each contribute to the world.
Right, because at the end of the day, true satisfaction comes from living a life that has meaning and purpose, whether you're famous or not.
Absolutely.
It sounds like we've really broken down this topic today. We talked about the allure, the reality, the sacrifices, and even the impact celebrity culture has on our own lives. You came to this deep dive wanting to understand celebrity culture better, and I think we've given you plenty to think about.
I think so. But remember, this is just the start. As you continue to learn about this fascinating and ever-changing world, keep asking questions, challenge your assumptions, and define your own path.
This deep dive has really made it clear that the most important question isn't how do I become famous, but rather how do I live a life that's true to me, that brings me joy, and makes a difference in the world, and that's a journey worth taking.
Until next time, keep it real, keep it fun, and always keep it in the box.